Montana Territory, 1872. Dust clouds billowed across the vast prairie as Isaac Zane guided his horse through the rolling grassland. At 25, he had already spent 7 years working cattle, his tanned skin and calloused hands testaments to the harsh frontier life. The evening sun cast long shadows across the landscape, painting the world in amber hues that matched the loneliness in his heart. "Come on, Thunder," Isaac urged his chestnut gelding forward. Just a few more miles to Willow Creek. The small frontier town represented nothing more than a place to resupply and perhaps enjoy a hot meal before heading back to the open range. Isaac preferred it that way. He had learned early that attachments were dangerous in this unforgiving land. His parents' homestead had been destroyed in a Sioux raid when he was 16, leaving him orphaned and convinced of one immutable truth: the frontier was a place for survival, not for love. Those who opened their hearts inevitably lost them to tragedy. As the cluster of wooden buildings came into view, Isaac adjusted his hat against the setting sun. His foreman had tasked him with securing supplies for the upcoming cattle drive, a simple enough mission that required minimal interaction with others, which suited him fine. He had no interest in the matchmaking efforts of well-meaning townsfolk who seemed determined to pair off every unattached cowboy with some hopeful frontier woman. A man and his horse. That's all the companionship needed out here, he muttered to Thunder, who flicked an ear in response. Yet beneath his stoic exterior, a hollow ache persisted, an emptiness he refused to acknowledge as loneliness. Isaac's reputation as a skilled cowhand preceded him. At the Double R Ranch, he earned respect through hard work and unfailing reliability. The ranch hands valued his quiet competence, though few penetrated the careful distance he maintained. Some called him standoffish. Others assumed he carried dark memories from the Indian Wars. Neither assessment was entirely wrong, but the truth was simpler. Isaac believed the West would eventually claim everyone he cared about, so he cared about no one. As Isaac approached Willow Creek's main street, the sounds of civilization reached him. Piano music drifting from the saloon, the blacksmith's hammer ringing against metal, and voices carrying on the evening breeze. He dismounted in front of the general store, tethering Thunder to the hitching post with practiced ease. The bell above the door announced his arrival as Isaac stepped into the dimly lit interior. The familiar sense of coffee, leather, and tobacco greeted him. He nodded curtly to Mr. Peterson, the proprietor, before producing his supply list from his vest pocket. "Evening, Zane," Peterson called. "Heard you boys are driving cattle to Cheyenne next week." "That's the plan," Isaac replied, his voice low from disuse. "Need these supplies by tomorrow if possible. Might take till morning to gather everything," Peterson said, scanning the list. "You staying in town?" Isaac nodded reluctantly. "Reckon so." His plans for a quiet night were interrupted by a commotion outside, shouting, followed by the sound of something heavy falling. Instinctively, Isaac moved to the window, hand resting on his revolver. A wagon had overturned at the edge of town, its wheel broken clean off. A young woman stood beside it, frantically trying to calm a startled horse while an older man, her father, judging by appearance, examined the damage with obvious dismay. Isaac turned away, not his concern, but Peterson was already heading for the door. "That's Dr. Winslow and his daughter just arrived from back east," Peterson explained. "Been expecting them. Town's been without a doctor since old Doc Miller passed last winter." Before Isaac could protest, Peterson had him by the arm. "Come on, son. They'll need help." The moment Isaac stepped outside, his life changed forever, though he wouldn't realize it until much later. There, silhouetted against the sunset, stood Grace Winslow. At 20 years old, she possessed a beauty that struck Isaac with almost physical force. Her chestnut hair, partially escaped from its pins, caught the last golden rays of sunlight. Her emerald green traveling dress, though dusty from the journey, couldn't disguise her slender figure. But it was her eyes, clear blue and determined despite their current predicament, that truly captured his attention. "Thank heavens," Dr. Winslow said upon seeing Peterson and Isaac approach. "We've had quite the mishap. The wheels simply gave way." "This is Isaac Zane," Peterson introduced. "One of the best hands from Double R. If anyone can help, he can." Isaac found himself unable to form words as Grace Winslow turned those striking blue eyes upon him. He managed a nod, then forced himself to focus on the practical problem at hand rather than the unfamiliar flutter in his chest. "Got your bags inside?" he finally asked, examining the broken wheel. "You'll need somewhere to stay while this gets fixed." "Our trunks are still in the wagon," Grace replied, her voice carrying a slight Eastern refinement that stood out against the rough frontier backdrop. "But I'm afraid several of Father's medical supplies may have been damaged in the fall." Isaac moved to help secure the remaining luggage. As he reached for a trunk, Grace reached for the same handle, and their hands brushed. The contact lasted only a second, but Isaac felt it like a lightning strike. "I apologize, Mr. Zane," she said, pulling back slightly but meeting his gaze directly. "And thank you for your assistance. We've traveled so far, and Father is desperately needed here." "Just Isaac," he corrected automatically, surprising himself. He never invited such familiarity. As the evening progressed, Isaac found himself inexplicably volunteering not only to help with the wagon repairs, but also to assist in moving the Winslows' belongings to their new home, a small building that would serve as both residence and medical practice. "You're certain your ranch won't miss you?" Dr. Winslow asked as they carried the last of the medical supplies inside. "I'm in town for supplies anyway," Isaac replied, uncomfortable with the gratitude. "Heading back tomorrow." Grace appeared in the doorway, having changed into a simpler blue dress that matched her eyes. "Then you must join us for dinner, Isaac. It's the least we can do." Every instinct warned Isaac to decline, to retreat to the safety of isolation. Instead, he heard himself accepting. That dinner changed everything. As Grace recounted their journey west with animated gestures and infectious enthusiasm, Isaac found himself speaking more than he had in months. She drew stories from him about ranch life, cattle drives, and the beauty of the open prairie that he'd never bothered to articulate before. "And you've never wanted anything else? A home of your own, perhaps?" Grace asked innocently over coffee. Isaac's expression darkened. "The frontier isn't kind to homesteaders. Safer to keep moving. Yet people build lives here every day," she countered. "My father and I have come to stay, to build something meaningful." "Then you're braver than most," Isaac replied, unable to explain his certainty that such dreams invariably ended in heartbreak. When he left that evening, Isaac told himself it was merely an unusual night, a momentary detour from his solitary path. Yet as he lay awake in his rented room above the saloon, Grace Winslow's face haunted him, challenging everything he believed about life on the frontier. The next morning, Isaac collected the ranch supplies earlier than expected. The reasonable course would be to return immediately to Double R. Instead, he found himself leading Thunder toward the doctor's new practice, a small box of medical instruments in hand. "The blacksmith had these," he explained awkwardly when Grace opened the door. "Said they belonged to the old doctor. Thought they might be useful." Her smile was like sunrise breaking over the prairie. "Would you like to come in? Father's already been called to the Miller farm. Their son fell from the hayloft." "I should get back to the ranch," Isaac said, even as he stepped over the threshold. 1 hour stretched into 2 as Grace unpacked medical texts and arranged supplies, asking Isaac's advice on local ailments and conditions. Her intelligence matched her beauty, and Isaac found himself drawn into discussions about frontier medicine, surprising himself with knowledge gained through years of practical experience with injured ranch hands and livestock. "You've quite the medical mind, Isaac," Grace observed. "Have you ever considered becoming a doctor's assistant?" The question startled him. "Never stayed in one place long enough." "And why is that?" she asked, those blue eyes seeing too much. The truth spilled from him before he could stop it. "Lost my family to a raid when I was 16. Learned then that building anything permanent out here is just setting yourself up for heartbreak." Instead of the pity he expected, Grace's expression showed understanding. "My mother died of influenza 3 years ago. Father and I came west partly to escape those memories. But I believe we honor those we've lost by building something new, not by stopping our lives." Her words struck Isaac like a physical blow, challenging the philosophy that had governed his existence for nearly a decade. As he finally mounted Thunder to return to the ranch, Isaac felt fundamentally altered, as though Grace Winslow had reached inside him and rearranged something vital. The sensation was terrifying. "I won't be back in town for weeks," he told her as he prepared to leave. "We're driving cattle to Cheyenne." "Then I wish you safe travels, Isaac Zane," she replied, standing in the doorway of her new home. Montana will be waiting when you return. It wasn't Montana he thought about during the long, grueling cattle drive that followed. As he rode through thunderstorms, forded rivers, and calmed spooked cattle, Isaac found his mind returning to Grace with unsettling frequency. Her words challenged him, her smile haunted him, and her courage in facing frontier life with such optimism made his own philosophy seem hollow. "You're mighty distracted, Zane," observed Silas, the trail boss, one night as they sat by the campfire. "Never known you to burn beans before." Isaac grunted in response, uncomfortable with how easily his thoughts had been read. "Got that look about you," Silas continued, tamping tobacco into his pipe. "Seen it before? Town girl. Just tired." Isaac replied curtly, but Silas's knowing chuckle followed him as he walked away to check the horses. The cattle drive proved more dangerous than anticipated. 3 days from Cheyenne, a flash flood swept through their camp at night. Isaac woke to shouting and the terrifying sound of water rushing toward them. In the chaos that followed, he helped rescue 2 younger cowboys caught in the rising waters, earning a deep gash on his arm in the process. As Silas roughly bandaged the wound by firelight, Isaac found himself thinking of Grace's gentle hands and wondering how differently she would have tended the injury. The thought was so unexpected it nearly made him laugh aloud. "You'll need proper stitching in Cheyenne," Silas advised. "Might scar otherwise." Isaac nodded absently. For the first time, he considered what it might mean to have a doctor nearby, not just for practical reasons, but because that doctor had a daughter whose memory he couldn't shake. After delivering the cattle and collecting payment in Cheyenne, the double are hands prepared for the long journey home. Isaac found himself unusually eager to return, though he tried to hide it beneath his typical stoicism. They arrived back in Montana territory 3 weeks later than planned, delayed by early autumn storms that turned trails to mud. Isaac's first glimpse of Willow Creek on the horizon made his heart beat faster in a way he refused to examine too closely. "Need to check on that wagon repair for Dr. Winslow," he told the foreman casually. "Mind if I ride ahead?" The knowing looks exchanged among the other cowboys told Isaac his interest wasn't as well disguised as he'd hoped. Willow Creek had changed in the 6 weeks of his absence. New buildings stood half-constructed along the main street, and the town bustled with unexpected activity. As Isaac tied thunder outside the doctor's practice, he noticed freshly painted trim and flower boxes beneath the windows, touches that hadn't been there before. His knock was answered not by Grace, but by a young boy with his arm in a sling. "Dr. Winslow's at the schoolhouse," the boy informed him. "Fever's going through the children. Miss Grace is helping." Isaac's concern overcame his hesitation. He quickly remounted and rode to the small log building that served as the town's school. Inside, he found a scene of organized chaos. A dozen children on makeshift pallets, parents hovering anxiously, and Dr. Winslow moving between patients with practiced efficiency. And there was Grace, her hair tied back simply, sleeves rolled up as she bathed a child's forehead with cool water. She looked up as Isaac entered, and the recognition that flashed across her face sent a warmth through him he couldn't deny. "Isaac," she said, straightening. Her simple cotton dress was practical rather than fashionable, yet she had never looked more beautiful to him. "You've returned." "Just got back," he replied, suddenly aware of his trail-worn appearance and days of stubble. "Heard there was trouble." Dr. Winslow approached, looking exhausted but determined. "Mountain fever, I believe. We've lost 2 children already, but I think we've turned the corner with the rest." Without being asked, Isaac found himself helping, carrying water, moving patients, and following Grace's instructions. Hours passed, and as night fell, he remained, bringing food from the hotel for the doctor and his daughter. "You should rest," he told Grace as she sat beside a sleeping child, checking his temperature. "You look ready to drop." "I could say the same to you," she replied, but a small smile softened her words. "You've been riding for days, yet here you are." "Seemed like you needed help," he said simply. "We did. We do." Her fingers brushed his hand momentarily. "Thank you." That touch lingered with Isaac long after he'd returned to the ranch that night. In the following days, he found himself riding into town at every opportunity, ostensibly to help with the fever outbreak. The truth was both simpler and more terrifying. He needed to see Grace. As the crisis passed and autumn settled fully over the territory, Isaac faced an uncomfortable realization. In Grace Winslow, he had found someone who made him question everything he believed about survival on the frontier. She brought light and purpose to Willow Creek in ways that transformed not just the town, but him as well. One crisp October afternoon, Isaac found Grace outside the newly constructed church, planting bulbs along the pathway. "Tulips," she explained, wiping soil from her hands. "They'll bloom in spring." "Planning that far ahead?" he asked, kneeling beside her. "Of course. Isn't that what building a life means?" Her blue eyes challenged him. "Father and I are staying, Isaac. This is home now. Winters are harsh here," he warned, falling back on practical concerns to mask deeper fears. "Spring might not come for those bulbs." "Then we'll plant more," she said simply. "That's what you do when you believe in something. You keep trying, even knowing you might fail." In that moment, looking at her determined face framed by wisps of chestnut hair escaped from her bonnet, Isaac realized he was falling in love with Grace Winslow. The thought terrified him. "I should go," he said abruptly, standing. "Isaac," her voice stopped him. "The harvest dance is Saturday. Will you come?" Against his better judgment, Isaac found himself at that dance, uncomfortable in his best shirt, watching as Grace laughed and twirled with various townsmen. When she finally approached him where he stood by the punch bowl, her cheeks were flushed with exertion. "Are you planning to stand there all night? Or might you ask a lady to dance?" she teased. "Not much for dancing," he mumbled. "Then perhaps a walk?" She offered her arm, and Isaac found himself escorting her outside into the cool autumn night. Under a canopy of stars, they strolled to the edge of town. The vast prairie stretched before them, bathed in moonlight. "It's beautiful," Grace said softly. "I never imagined it would feel so infinite." "That's what scared me at first," Isaac admitted. "How small it makes a person feel." "Or how connected," she countered. "Under these stars, we're part of something greater." Isaac turned to look at her, moonlight silvering her profile. "You see hope everywhere, don't you?" "Not everywhere," she replied, meeting his gaze. "But I see it in you, Isaac Zane, even if you don't yet see it in yourself." He wanted to kiss her then, with a suddenness that left him breathless. Instead, he took her hand, a gesture that felt more significant than any kiss might have been. "Grace," he began hesitantly, "I'm not good at building things. At staying. Perhaps you simply haven't found the right foundation yet," she replied, her fingers tightening around his. That night marked a turning point. Throughout November, Isaac found reasons to visit town almost daily. He helped repair the church roof, built shelves for the doctor's office, and spent long evenings by the Winslow's fire, discussing books from Grace's extensive library. Each visit chipped away at his certainty that attachment meant inevitable pain. Then winter arrived with brutal force. A blizzard swept down from the north, burying the territory in 3 feet of snow overnight. Trapped at the ranch, Isaac worried constantly about Willow Creek, about Grace. When the storm finally broke after 4 days, he immediately set out despite the foreman's warnings. The journey that normally took 2 hours stretched to 6 as thunder struggled through deep drifts. By the time Isaac reached town, he was half frozen and frantic. The doctor's house appeared abandoned at first glance, no smoke rising from the chimney. Fear clutched at Isaac's heart as he pounded on the door. When it finally opened, Grace stood there, wrapped in blankets, her face pale with cold. "Isaac," she whispered, her voice weak. "Father's ill, pneumonia, I think. The firewood, we ran out yesterday." Without a word, Isaac carried her back to the fireplace, then set about breaking up a wooden chair for kindling. Within minutes, he had a fire blazing. He found Dr. Winslow in bed, his breathing labored, his forehead burning with fever. "How long has he been like this?" Isaac demanded. 3 days, Grace replied, her composure finally breaking. "I've tried everything. The medicine chest. We used the last of the quinine for the children." For 3 days and nights, Isaac remained, melting snow for water, hunting rabbits for broth, and keeping the fire burning continuously. He watched as Grace tended her father with unwavering dedication despite her own exhaustion. Together, they fought death in that small frontier home, their shared purpose forging a bond deeper than words. On the 4th morning, Dr. Winslow's fever broke. As the old man slept peacefully for the first time in days, Grace collapsed into Isaac's arms, weeks of tension finally finding release in quiet tears. "I thought I would lose him too," she confessed. Like mother. You didn't. Isaac murmured into her hair. You're stronger than anything this frontier can throw at you, Grace Winslow. She looked up at him. Vulnerability and strength mingled in her expression. Not alone, I'm not. I needed you, Isaac. The admission shattered something inside him, the final barrier he'd built against connection. Before he could respond, hoofbeats approached outside, and urgent knocking followed. It was Silas, the trail boss, his expression grave beneath the frost coating his beard. Zane, you're needed. Raiders hit the north pasture, rustled nearly 50 head, and shot 2 hands. Isaac looked from Silas to Grace, torn between duties. Go, she said, straightening her shoulders. Father's through the worst. We'll manage now. He rode out with Silas, but not before promising to return. As they tracked the cattle thieves through the snow, Isaac realized something fundamental had changed. For the first time since his parents' deaths, he had someone, to return to. The thought didn't frighten him anymore. It strengthened his resolve. The pursuit took them deep into hostile territory. After 4 days of tracking, they finally located the rustlers' camp in a sheltered canyon. The ensuing gunfight was brief but brutal. Isaac took a bullet in the shoulder, but they recovered most of the cattle and captured 3 of the thieves. By the time they returned to Double R, rumors had reached the ranch that the notorious Blackburn gang was moving through the territory, leaving destruction in their wake. More concerning were whispers that they'd been asking questions about Willow Creek's new doctor. What would Blackburn want with Dr. Winslow? Isaac demanded of Sheriff Taylor when he rode into town the following day, his wounded shoulder crudely bandaged. Not the doctor, Taylor replied grimly. Word is, they're after a woman who can identify them for a bank robbery back east. A witness who disappeared, a doctor's daughter. Isaac's blood ran cold. He found Grace at the schoolhouse, teaching children despite the bitter cold. When he pulled her aside, her face paled at his news. Is it true, he asked. Were you there? Did you see them? Grace's hands trembled. In Philadelphia, last spring. They killed 3 people. I testified at the preliminary hearing, but Father worried they would find me, so we came west before the trial. Her eyes met his, fear evident. How did they find me? Doesn't matter, Isaac said, his decision already made. Pack what you need. I'm taking you to the ranch until this is settled. And Father? The children? The doctor comes too. The town will manage. That night, Isaac stood guard at Double R's main house, where Grace and her father had been given rooms. His shoulder throbbed, but he refused treatment beyond Grace's rebandaging. Every shadow, every sound put him on alert. You should rest, Grace said, finding him by the window near midnight. Your wound needs time to heal. I'll rest when you're safe, he replied simply. She studied him in the lamplight. This is why you never stayed anywhere, isn't it? Not just fear of loss, but the need to protect others from your presence. You believed you brought danger. Her perception startled him. My parents died because they settled, made themselves targets. And now I've made you a target, she said softly. By bringing my past here. No. Isaac turned to her fully. You've given me something to fight for. There's a difference. The next morning brought news that the Blackburn gang had been spotted just 15 miles away. The ranch hands prepared for defense, but Isaac knew they were outgunned. We need to move you, he told Grace. There's a military outpost 3 days' ride from here. Running won't solve this, she argued. They'll keep coming. Before they could decide, riders appeared on the horizon, not the expected gang, but a U.S. Marshal and 6 deputies. We've been tracking Blackburn since Denver, Marshal Davis explained when Isaac met them at the gate. Heard they were headed this way looking for a witness. The relief Isaac felt was short-lived. That evening, as the lawmen set up camp near the ranch, a ranch hand rode in with news that chilled everyone's blood. Blackburn had taken hostages in Willow Creek and demanded Grace be delivered to them by morning. I have to go back, Grace insisted, her face ashen but determined. Absolutely not, both Isaac and Marshal Davis said in unison. Those people are there because of me, she argued. Children, Isaac. Families. The marshal outlined a plan to surround the town and ambush the gang, but Isaac saw the flaws immediately. Too many civilians, too many ways for it to go wrong. There's another way, Isaac said finally. But you'll have to trust me, Grace. In the pre-dawn hours, Grace Winslow rode toward Willow Creek, her slender figure silhouetted against the lightening sky. From the trees 100 yards behind, Isaac watched through a spyglass, his heart in his throat. The marshal and his men were positioned around the town, waiting. Grace's horse stopped at the edge of town. A man emerged from the saloon, Blackburn himself, recognizable from the wanted posters. Miss Winslow, his voice carried on the morning air. Brave of you to come alone. Release the hostages first, Grace called back, her voice remarkably steady. As Blackburn stepped forward, Isaac gave the signal. A single shot rang out, not from the lawman, but from Isaac himself, positioned in the perfect sniper's nest. Blackburn fell, and chaos erupted. The plan worked better than anyone had dared hope. With their leader down, the gang's discipline collapsed. 3 were captured, 2 killed, and 1 escaped into the hills, later to be found frozen to death. Most importantly, all the hostages were rescued unharmed. In the aftermath, as the town celebrated its deliverance, Isaac found Grace tending to minor injuries in her father's office. You could have been killed, he said, the fear he'd suppressed during the operation finally breaking through. So could you, she countered, setting down her bandages to face him. Yet here we stand. Grace, Isaac began, struggling to articulate the revelation that had come to him while watching her ride toward danger. I've spent years believing the frontier only takes. That loving something means losing it. And now, her voice was barely above a whisper. Now I know that some things are worth the risk. He took her hands in his. You showed me that having something to lose means having something worth fighting for. Spring came early that year. As March winds gave way to April sunshine, tulips emerged along the church pathway, Grace's bulbs, defying winter's harshness just as she had promised they would. On a perfect May morning, with prairie wildflowers carpeting the rolling hills, Isaac Zane and Grace Winslow were married beneath the open sky. The entire town of Willow Creek attended, along with the hands from Double R Ranch. Never thought I'd see the day, Silas commented as he shook Isaac's hand. You settling down, building something. Isaac's gaze found Grace, radiant in a simple white dress with wildflowers in her chestnut hair. Found something worth building for. Their wedding gift from the town was a parcel of land halfway between Willow Creek and the ranch, perfect for the home they planned to build. Dr. Winslow had trained a local woman as a nurse, allowing him to divide his time between town and the small clinic they would establish on their property. That evening, as the celebration continued in town, Isaac took Grace's hand and led her to a ridge overlooking their future homestead. The setting sun painted the vast prairie in hues of gold and amber, while stars began appearing in the eastern sky. What are you thinking? Grace asked, leaning into his embrace. That I spent years afraid of putting down roots, Isaac replied, his arms tightening around her. Never realized roots are what keep you standing when storms come. She turned in his arms, her blue eyes reflecting the last light of day. And there will be storms, Isaac. This land doesn't make promises. Neither does life anywhere, he said, the wisdom hard one. But facing it together, that makes all the difference. As darkness settled over the prairie, they remained on the ridge, planning their future beneath the stars. The same vast sky that had once symbolized Isaac's isolation now represented possibility, a canopy under which their love had found root and flourished against all odds. By the following spring, their home stood completed, a sturdy ranch house with wide windows facing the prairie. Grace's garden flourished, supplying herbs for her father's medical practice and food for their table. Isaac divided his time between ranching and helping establish the region's first proper medical clinic, surprising himself with his aptitude for the healing arts. 5 years after their wedding, as summer wildflowers again carpeted the prairie, Isaac returned from the north pasture to find Grace waiting on their front porch, their 3-year-old son playing at her feet and their infant daughter cradled in her arms. Welcome home, she called, her smile as radiant as the day they met. Isaac dismounted, taking in the scene, his family, his home, the life they'd built together against the backdrop of the untamed frontier. The evening sun bathed them in golden light as a gentle breeze carried the scent of sage across the prairie. Home, he repeated, gathering his family close beneath the endless Montana sky. The cowboy who once believed the frontier too harsh for love had found not just a house, but a haven, not just companionship, but completion, with the woman who had shown him that even in the wildest places, the heart could find its true home.